I can see the highway stretching out in front of me, endless and gray, my suitcase tumbling past the guardrail as cars honk and swerve around me. My phone is dead, my credit card is maxed out, and I'm standing on the shoulder of Interstate 40 in a sundress and flip-flops at 7 in the evening, watching my marriage disappear in the rearview mirror of a silver Lexus. But that's not where this starts. Let me back up to 3 hours earlier, because you need to understand what kind of marriage I thought I had before everything went sideways. My name is Ashley. I'm 34 years old, and until last Tuesday I was living what I genuinely believed was the kind of life other people envied. The kind you see in those Instagram photos where everything looks effortless. The white farmhouse kitchen, the golden retriever named Cooper, the husband who still brought you coffee in bed on Saturdays. Michael and I had been married for 6 years. We met at a software company in Austin where he was a senior developer and I worked in HR. He was the guy everyone wanted, quiet confidence, good with his hands, could fix literally anything around the house. I was the girl who organized the office potlucks and remembered everyone's birthdays. We made sense on paper, and we made sense in person too. Or so I thought. We'd bought our house in Westlake Hills 3 years ago, a 4-bedroom with a pool, right on the edge of the hill country. The mortgage was steep, sure. Michael's salary was good, 6 figures even, and I was making decent money too. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. We had the kind of life where we could take a weekend trip without checking our bank account first. Michael's mother, Karen, lived 40 minutes away in a suburb called Cedar Park. She was the kind of mother-in-law who showed up unannounced, had opinions about everything from my weight to my decorating choices, and seemed genuinely convinced that I'd stolen her son. But Michael loved her, and he kept the peace by visiting every other Sunday. I went along because that's what you do. That's what I thought love looked like. Compromise, tolerance, showing up even when you didn't want to. The thing about a good life, though, is that you stop paying attention to the cracks. I didn't notice that Michael had started taking extra meetings on Sunday mornings. I didn't think twice when he said he needed to help his mom with her garden project and would be home late. I didn't question the new password on his laptop or why he suddenly started locking his phone. I was too busy being happy, too busy believing we were fine. Last Tuesday started like any other Tuesday. Michael left for work at 7:30. He kissed me on the forehead, he always did, and said he'd be home by 6. I spent the day at the office handling a termination for cause and updating the employee handbook. Normal stuff. Boring stuff. The kind of Tuesday that doesn't change your life. At 4:30, I got a text from Karen. "Can you come by the house? Michael's here and we need to discuss something about the family." I remember staring at that message. It was oddly formal. Karen never texted me directly. She called Michael and had him relay information. She especially never asked me to come to her house. We didn't have that kind of relationship. But I texted back, "Sure, I'll head over after work." I was thinking maybe she needed help planning something for Michael's birthday, which was coming up in August. Or maybe she'd finally decided to sell that old Volvo in her driveway and wanted our opinion on the price. I had no idea I was about to walk into a room and watch my husband refuse to make eye contact with me while his mother sat on her cream-colored sofa with her hands folded in her lap, wearing an expression that looked like barely contained satisfaction. Michael was standing by the window when I arrived, still in his work clothes. He didn't turn around when I came in. "What's going on?" I asked. My stomach was already tight. Some part of me knew. Karen gestured to the chair across from her. Not next to Michael, I noticed. Never next to Michael. "Sit down, Ashley," she said. I didn't sit. "Michael, what is this?" He turned around then, and his face was closed off in a way I'd never seen before, like he was already saying goodbye. "My mother thinks we should talk about some things," he said quietly. "I don't care what your mother thinks," I said. "I care what you think. What's happening?" Karen cleared her throat. "Michael's made some decisions about his future, decisions that affect both of you." "Stop talking in riddles," I snapped at her. I was looking at Michael. "Just tell me what's going on." He finally met my eyes, and I saw something in them that made my chest go tight. Guilt, resignation, the look of someone who'd already checked out. "I want a divorce," he said. The words landed like a physical blow. I sat down then, not because Karen wanted me to, but because my legs stopped working. "What?" I heard myself say it from very far away, like I was watching this scene from outside my body. "What are you talking about?" "I'm not happy," Michael said. He was using his patient voice, the one he used with difficult clients. "I haven't been happy for a long time." "Since when?" I asked. "Since when are you unhappy? You never said anything. We have a life. We have a home. Since before we got married," Karen interjected. I looked at her sharply. "Excuse me?" "Michael has always had doubts," she continued, as if she was the expert on my marriage. "I've told him he needs to do what makes him happy, not what makes other people comfortable." I stood up. "This is insane. Michael, you need to tell me what's actually happening here, not what your mother thinks is happening. What's actually happening with you?" He looked away again. "I've been seeing someone." The room tilted. "How long?" I asked. 14 months, Karen answered for him. I turned on her. "I swear to God, if you say one more word—" "Ashley," Michael started. "How long?" I repeated, looking only at him. 14 months, he finally said. 14 months. I tried to calculate. That was March of last year. That was when we'd taken that trip to San Antonio. That was when he'd said he loved me in the restaurant on the Riverwalk, and I'd believed him. That was over a year of him lying to my face, while his mother apparently sat at home cheering him on. "Who is she?" I asked. Michael didn't answer. "Who is she, Michael?" "Her name is Jennifer," Karen said. "She's a very nice girl, much more suited to Michael's temperament." I walked out of that house without another word. I got in my car and I drove, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the wheel. I drove past the turnoff to our house and kept going, heading back toward the highway. I called Michael's cell phone 15 times. He didn't answer. I called again and again, watching the call log build up like evidence. By the time I got back to Cedar Park, night was falling. My phone had 37% battery. I drove to Karen's house because that's where Michael's car was, and I parked in the driveway and walked up to the door. He came out before I could knock. "We need to talk," I said, "alone, not with your mother." "There's nothing to talk about," he said. He wouldn't look at me. "There's everything to talk about. Our house, our life, our marriage. You can't just decide it's over without—" "I've decided," he said flatly. "I'm staying with my mom for a while. I'll have my lawyer contact you about the house and the separation agreement." "Your lawyer? Michael, I'm your wife." "Not for long," he said. I felt something break inside my chest. I reached for him, just his arm, just to make him look at me, and he stepped back. "Don't," he said. "Don't what? Don't touch you? We sleep in the same bed, Michael. We made love 2 days ago. You can't just—" "I want you out of the house," he said. His voice was steady, resolved. "By tomorrow morning. My mother says I should change the locks, but I'm being generous. Pack your things and go." "Go where?" I asked. "Michael, our house is in both our names. You can't just—" "I'm calling the police if you don't leave," he said quietly. "I can say you're trespassing. I can say I don't feel safe. Take your pick." I stared at him. This was my husband, the man who'd held my hair back when I had food poisoning, who'd sat with me in the emergency room when I thought I was having a heart attack but it was just anxiety, who'd promised me forever on a beach in Cancun. "I'll give you until 8 in the morning," he said. "Then I'm changing the locks." He went back inside and closed the door. I sat in my car for an hour, just sitting there, watching the house. At 9:30, I drove to our house. My house, I kept thinking, my house, and I started to pack. I filled 2 suitcases and my work bag. I didn't know where I was going. I had a friend from college, Diane, who lived in Houston. I thought maybe I could drive there. I thought maybe I could figure this out on the way. I left at midnight. I left a note on the kitchen counter that said, "I'm taking what's mine. Call me when you're ready to talk about this like adults." I drove for 2 hours in silence, just me and the dark highway, and the feeling that I was driving away from my entire life. By 2 in the morning, I was somewhere outside of Waco, and I pulled into a motel and paid cash for a room because my credit card was starting to feel like a liability. I sat on the bed and I called Diane. She didn't answer. I called her again at 3 in the morning. She texted back, "Ash, everything okay?" I typed back, "Can I stay with you for a few days?" She responded immediately, "Of course, drive safe, call me when you're close." So that's what I did. I drove to Houston. I stayed with Diane for a week while my brain tried to catch up with what had happened. While I tried to understand how a marriage could end in an afternoon, how a man could go from saying, "I love you," to "get out" in 14 months. It wasn't until I was sitting in Diane's guest room at midnight on Friday that I opened my email and saw a message from Michael's lawyer. The subject line said, "Separation agreement and property division." I opened it with hands that felt numb. The first line made me go cold. Our client requests an immediate separation and the sale of the marital residence at 4847 Lakeside Drive, Austin, Texas. He is prepared to offer you $85,000 as your portion of the equity in exchange for you signing away all claims to the property and waiving alimony. $85,000. The house was worth at least $650,000. We'd put down $120,000 as a down payment. We'd paid down the mortgage to roughly $480,000. That meant there was nearly $170,000 in equity. He was offering me half of what was fair and asking me to sign away everything else. And that's when I realized something had shifted. This wasn't about happiness or compatibility or Jennifer or whatever her name was. This was about money. This was about control. This was about his mother. And I was going to fight back. But first, I had to figure out how. I sat in Diane's guest room at 2 a.m, my laptop screen glowing in the dark, and I read that email 4 times. Each time the numbers stayed the same, 85,000. My hands were shaking so badly I had to set the laptop on my thighs. Diane knocked softly on the door. Even through my shock, I realized she'd probably heard me crying. "Ash, you okay?" She stood in the doorway in her pajamas, her face creased with worry. I couldn't answer. I just turned the laptop toward her. She read the email in silence. I watched her face as her eyes moved across the screen, watched the moment her expression shifted from concern to anger. "That's insane," she said finally. "That's absolutely insane. Ashley, you're entitled to half the equity. Half. That's not a negotiation." "I know," I whispered. "Do you have a lawyer?" "I don't even have a plan," I said. My voice sounded hollow. "I have about $4,000 in my savings account. The credit card is maxed out at $22,000. My car payment is $600 a month. I have no place to live, and my husband is offering me $85,000 to disappear." Diane sat down on the edge of the bed. Okay, we're going to fix this. You need a divorce attorney, a good one." "I can't afford a good one. I can't afford anyone. Do you know what divorce lawyers cost? I looked it up this afternoon. $500 an hour. I'd need $10,000 just for initial consultations." "Then we'll figure it out," Diane said firmly. "You're not accepting that offer. You're not signing anything. But the thing about being abandoned on the side of the road, emotionally speaking, is that your survival instinct kicks in. And survival instinct tells you to take the offer, to sign the papers, to get what you can and run. I spent the next 5 days in a haze. I called my mom in San Antonio, and she came up to Houston. She sat with me in Diane's living room while I explained what had happened, and I watched my mother's face cycle through shock, anger, and then a kind of grim determination I recognized from childhood. She was the woman who'd raised me alone after my father left, who'd worked 2 jobs to keep us afloat, who'd taught me that you don't quit and you don't give up. "We're fighting this," she said flatly. "Not negotiating, fighting." "Mom, I don't have money for—" "I have money," she interrupted. "Not a lot, but I have something. We'll find a lawyer who works on contingency, or we'll figure out a payment plan." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to feel that fierce maternal protection kick in and save me. But mostly, I felt like I was drowning. I did something then that I'm not proud of. I called Michael. He didn't answer the first 3 times. On the 4th call, he picked up. "Ashley, stop calling," he said immediately. "I got your lawyer's email," I said. My voice was steady, which surprised me. I'm not accepting that offer." There was a long silence. "You're going to take it," he said finally, "because if you don't, this is going to get very expensive for you." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact," he said. "My lawyer is very good, and I have the resources to make your life difficult." "Your mother, you mean," I said. "This is your mother, isn't it? This whole thing." "You don't know anything about it," he said coldly. "I know my husband wouldn't do this without his mother whispering in his ear. I know you don't have the spine to make this decision on your own." "Believe what you want," he said, "but sign the papers, Ashley. Don't make this harder than it has to be." He hung up. I sat there holding my phone, and something inside me shifted. The fear didn't go away. The desperation didn't go away. But something else rose up underneath it. Anger. Pure, clarifying anger. I spent that night researching lawyers. I called 14 divorce attorneys in Austin. 12 of them wanted $5,000 retainers up front. One of them, a woman named Rachel Brennan, actually listened to my situation. "Here's what I can do," she said, when I finally got her on the phone at 8 in the evening. "I'll take your case on a contingency basis for the property division, 50-50 split of any settlement above what he's offered. That means if we get you $170,000 instead of $85,000, I take 50% of the difference." "I don't understand," I said slowly. "It means I don't get paid unless you do, and I only get paid if we win. But Ashley, I need to be honest with you. This is going to be a fight. He's going to push back hard. His lawyer is already playing aggressive. That tells me there's something here worth protecting." "There is," I said. "That's our house. That's 6 years of my life." "Then let's fight for it," Rachel said. "When can you come in?" I drove back to Austin the next morning. My mom came with me. We went to Rachel's office in a converted house on Lamar Boulevard, and I sat across from her in a room that smelled like coffee and old paper, and I told her everything. She took notes. She asked questions, and when I got to the part about Karen, she looked up from her notepad and said something that changed everything. "Has he made any statements about you in writing? Texts, emails, anything?" "His lawyer sent the separation agreement," I said. "I mean him, Michael directly." I thought about the email where he said he wanted me out by 8 in the morning. I thought about the texts where he'd threatened to call the police. "I have some texts," I said. Rachel leaned forward. "Show me." I pulled out my phone and scrolled through. The messages were dated that day, 8 hours before he threw me out. "Michael, I want you out of the house by morning. Me, we need to talk about this." "Michael, there's nothing to talk about. Get out or I'll call the police and say you're trespassing." Rachel read them 3 times. "These are good," she said finally. "These show intent to remove you from the marital residence without due process. This shows he was already being advised by a lawyer. Nobody talks like this without legal counsel. And this shows premeditation." "What does that mean?" I asked. "It means he didn't make an impulsive decision. He planned this. He coordinated with his mother and his lawyer before he told you anything. That matters in Texas family law. That matters because it shows intent and possible financial manipulation." My mom reached over and squeezed my hand. "There's something else," Rachel said. "Have you looked at your joint credit card statements?" "No," I said. "I want you to pull them. Go back 12 months. Look for any unusual charges, any patterns. If he's been funding this affair, and he probably has, that's marital assets being spent on an extramarital relationship. That's a separate issue in our favor." I did it that night in my mom's hotel room. I pulled up our joint credit card account online, and I started scrolling through the statements. And then I saw it. A charge for a hotel in Cedar Park, 2 nights, dated 3 weeks ago. Then another one, a week before that. Then a restaurant charge in downtown Austin for 2 people, dated during the week when Michael said he was working late. The charges went back months, dozens of them. Restaurant charges, hotel charges, one for a jewelry store. I took screenshots of everything. I forwarded them to Rachel's email. My phone rang 5 minutes later. "Ashley," Rachel said, and her voice had changed. It was sharper now, focused. "This is exactly what we need. This is him spending marital assets on an extramarital affair. This is leverage." "What do we do?" I asked. We file a motion for temporary support and attorney's fees, she said. We go to court. We tell the judge what he did and we ask for protection. When? I asked. Tomorrow, she said. I'm filing first thing in the morning. And Ashley, don't accept any more communication from him or his lawyer. Anything you want to say goes through me now. Do you understand? I understand, I said. I hung up the phone and I looked at my mom, and for the first time since Michael said those 3 words, I want out, I felt something other than fear. I felt like I had a chance. But the next morning, when Rachel called me before the filing, her voice was different, tense. We have a problem, she said. Michael's lawyer just filed a motion for an emergency protective order. He's claiming you've been harassing him with multiple phone calls. He's saying you're a threat to his safety. My stomach dropped. That's not true, I said. I called him once, maybe twice. I know, Rachel said, but he's claiming you called 14 times in one evening and that you've been threatening him. I haven't threatened him. I believe you, she said, but we need to respond to this. And Ashley, I need to tell you something. If this protective order gets granted, you could lose access to the house entirely. You could be legally prohibited from contacting him, and it could affect your divorce settlement. The room tilted again. How is that possible? I asked. He's the one who kicked me out. He's the one who… He filed first, Rachel said quietly. That matters. In family law, sometimes it's not about who's guilty. It's about who has better documentation. I felt the anger rising again, but underneath it was something worse. Desperation. The kind that makes you do things you swore you wouldn't do. What do we do? I asked. We go to the hearing, Rachel said, and we fight like hell. The hearing was scheduled for the following Tuesday, 5 days away. 5 days to prepare for a judge to decide whether I was a threat to the man who'd thrown me out of my own house. 5 days to prepare for the possibility that my husband and his mother had just managed to take everything from me. And I realized, sitting there in my mom's hotel room with my hands shaking, that this wasn't over. It was just beginning. The hearing was scheduled for Tuesday at 10 in the morning. I wore a navy blazer and flat shoes. Rachel said the shoes mattered. She said judges notice when women try too hard or not hard enough, and flat shoes said I was grounded, serious, not performing. My mom sat in the gallery behind me. She'd taken off work. She'd driven back from San Antonio and checked into the same hotel I was staying at, because she wasn't about to let me do this alone. Rachel had prepared me for everything except the way Michael looked when he walked into the courtroom. He looked smaller than I remembered, older. His lawyer, a man named David Sherman with slicked back hair and a $5,000 suit, was already at the table. Michael sat next to him and refused to make eye contact with me. Karen wasn't there. I was grateful for that small mercy. The judge was a woman named Patricia Morse, maybe 60 years old, with reading glasses on a chain and an expression that suggested she'd seen every variation of this exact situation 1,000 times before. She reviewed the file in front of her for what felt like hours, but was probably 3 minutes. We're here regarding a motion for a temporary protective order filed by Michael Torres against Ashley Torres, she said finally, looking up from the papers. Mr. Sherman, you're representing the petitioner? Yes, Your Honor, Sherman said smoothly. He stood. We have evidence that Mrs. Torres has engaged in a pattern of harassment involving multiple phone calls and threatening messages. I'd like to see that evidence, Judge Morse said. Sherman presented a printout of Michael's phone records, showing 14 incoming calls from my number in a single evening. No transcripts of voicemails, no actual threats, just the call log. Rachel stood when it was her turn. Your Honor, Mrs. Torres made phone calls to her spouse during an extremely distressing evening when she had just been informed of an infidelity and ordered to vacate the marital home. These were calls to her husband, not to a stranger. There is no evidence of threats, no evidence of trespassing, no evidence of any behavior that would justify removing Mrs. Torres's right to contact her spouse of 6 years. The calls speak for themselves, Sherman said. 14 calls in 2 hours. That's obsessive behavior. That's a spouse in crisis, Rachel countered. And Your Honor, I'd like to present something else. She pulled out a folder. These are text messages sent by Michael Torres to Mrs. Torres on the evening in question. Judge Morse put on her reading glasses and took the papers. I watched Michael's face as she read them. I watched him realize what Rachel had done. I watched the color drain from his neck. "Mr. Torres," the judge said, looking at him over her glasses, "you told your wife to leave the house or you'd call the police and claim she was trespassing. Is that correct?" Michael looked at Sherman. Sherman nodded slightly. "Yes, Your Honor," Michael said quietly. "She was upset. I was trying to establish a boundary." "A boundary," the judge repeated. "By threatening to have your wife arrested in her own home?" "The house is in both our names," Rachel said. "Mrs. Torres had every legal right to be there. Mr. Torres's threat was not only inappropriate, it was potentially criminal." "That's not true," Sherman started, but Judge Morse raised her hand. "I'm going to stop you there," she said. "Mr. Torres, I'm denying your motion for a protective order. However, I am concerned about the living situation you've created. This court is issuing an order that the marital residence remains the residence of both parties until a final property division is determined. You may not exclude Mrs. Torres from the home, and she may not exclude you. If you need separate living arrangements, you will need to make them elsewhere." My chest felt tight. "Additionally," the judge continued, "I'm ordering Mrs. Torres to have temporary use of the marital residence as her primary residence, and I'm ordering Mr. Torres to contribute $500 per week toward her living expenses pending the final hearing." I felt my mom squeeze my shoulder from behind me, but Sherman wasn't done. He stood up. "Your Honor, if I may, we have additional matters we'd like to address. We have concerns about Mrs. Torres's access to joint financial accounts and—" "Your Honor," Rachel interrupted, "before Mr. Sherman continues, I'd like to present something that I believe is relevant to this court's understanding of the parties' financial situation." She pulled out another folder. This one was thick. "I've obtained the joint credit card statements for the past 14 months, she said. "I've highlighted charges totaling approximately $32,000 that Mr. Torres made at hotels, restaurants, and jewelry stores during periods when he represented to Mrs. Torres that he was working late or helping his mother with home projects." The judge took the papers. I watched her scan the highlighted sections. "These charges," Rachel continued, "represent marital assets spent on an extramarital affair. Under Texas Family Code Section 3.401, these are relevant to the division of community property and can result in a disproportionate award to the community." Sherman's face had gone red. "Your Honor, my client has a right to—" "Your client has a right to many things," Judge Morse said, "but he doesn't have a right to spend community assets on an affair and then ask this court to give him the same treatment as if he hadn't. Mrs. Torres is entitled to half of the marital estate. If Mr. Torres depleted that estate through an extramarital affair, that's his problem." She looked at Michael directly. "Mr. Torres, I'm ordering a full forensic accounting of all joint accounts dating back to January of last year. Mrs. Torres's counsel will have full access to all financial records. This court will reconvene in 30 days to determine final property division." "Your Honor," Sherman tried again. "We're done here," Judge Morse said. She banged her gavel once. "Mrs. Torres, you have the right to remain in the marital residence. Mr. Torres, you will vacate immediately or provide Mrs. Torres with written proof that you've secured alternative housing within 48 hours. Court adjourned." She stood and walked out, and the courtroom seemed to exhale. Rachel turned to me and smiled. It was a small smile, but it was a smile. "We just won the first round," she said quietly. Michael and Sherman were already gathering their papers, already arguing in low voices. Sherman was gesturing angrily. Michael looked like someone had hit him in the stomach. I stood up on legs that felt shaky, and my mom came around the bench and wrapped her arms around me from behind. "You did it," she whispered. "You did it, baby." I didn't feel like I'd done anything. I felt like I'd been carried through this by Rachel and by the judge and by the documentation of my husband's lies. But I also felt something else, a beginning, a sense that the narrative could shift, that I wasn't the villain in this story. That night, I drove back to my house, and I unlocked the front door with my key, and I stood in the foyer and I cried. Not from sadness, but from relief, from the fact that I hadn't been erased. The judge had said I had a right to be here. Michael couldn't take that away. I called Rachel from the kitchen. "What happens now?" I asked. "Now we wait for the forensic accounting," she said, "and we document everything he does. If he tries to remove anything from the house, if he contests the accounting, if he does anything at all, we document it." "Do you think we'll win?" I asked. "I think," Rachel said slowly, "that we've already won the important part. We've established that you're not the crazy ex-wife he wanted the judge to think you were. We've proven he lied, and we've shown that he spent marital money on an affair. From here, it's just about the numbers." After I hung up, I sat on the couch, our couch, and I looked at my phone. There was a text from Michael, sent while we were in the courtroom. "We need to talk about this. This isn't over." I didn't respond. Rachel had told me not to, but I thought about what I would have said if I could. "This is over. This was over the moment you decided that 14 months of lying was worth more than 6 years of marriage. This was over when you thought I'd just sign away $500,000 worth of equity because you asked nicely. This was over when you let your mother sit in your ear and convince you that I was the problem. What's happening now isn't the beginning of something. It's the end of something that was already dead." The forensic accounting took 6 weeks. Rachel's team went through every transaction, every deposit, every withdrawal. They found hotel charges, yes, but they also found something else. A wire transfer. $50,000 sent from our joint account to an account registered to Karen Torres in March of last year. When Rachel showed me that document, I felt something click into place. "That's the down payment for the house," I said. "What house?" Rachel asked. I remembered then. Karen had mentioned something about buying a condo. I thought she meant she was thinking about it. I'd had no idea Michael was funding it. "His mother's investment property," I said. "He bought it with our money." Rachel's eyes narrowed. She made a note. "This is good," she said. "This is very good." The final hearing was set for August, 2 months away. In that time, Michael moved into a furnished apartment in North Austin. Jennifer had apparently moved out of the picture. I never got confirmation of that, but she stopped appearing on his credit card statements. Maybe she'd served her purpose. Maybe she'd realized what she'd gotten herself into. I never found out and didn't care. What I did care about was the letter that arrived at my house in late July. It was from a title company. Michael had tried to refinance the house without my signature. The bank had flagged the issue and contacted me to verify my consent. I called Rachel immediately. "He's trying to take you out of the deed," she said. Her voice was cold. "He's trying to lock you out legally." "Can he do that?" "Not without your signature, not on a house in both your names. But the fact that he tried—" She trailed off. "This is going to help us." The final hearing was worse than the first one. Michael testified. He talked about irreconcilable differences. He talked about how unhappy he'd been. He cried at one point, and I almost felt sorry for him until I remembered that he'd cried while lying to me for 14 months. Sherman argued that Michael should retain the house because his income was higher, because he'd made the majority of the down payment. A lie, but Sherman made it anyway. Because he'd been the primary earner. Rachel countered with the forensic accounting. She presented the $50,000 transfer to Karen. She presented the hotel charges, the jewelry store charges, the restaurant charges. She presented the attempted refinance without my consent. "What Your Honor is looking at," Rachel said, "is a pattern of conduct designed to hide assets, conceal an affair, and ultimately remove Mrs. Torres from the marital property through intimidation and legal maneuvering. Mrs. Torres didn't cause this situation. She didn't spend $32,000 on an affair. She didn't transfer $50,000 of community funds to her mother-in-law. She didn't lie for 14 months, but she's being punished as if she did." Judge Morse listened to everything. She reviewed the documents, and when she spoke, she was direct. The marital estate consists of the residence, valued at approximately $650,000, with a mortgage of $480,000, leaving approximately $170,000 in equity. Under Texas law, community property is divided equally. However, Mr. Torres's conduct in hiding assets and spending community funds on an extramarital affair warrants a disproportionate division. She paused, and I held my breath. Mrs. Torres will receive the marital residence free and clear of the mortgage, with Mr. Torres responsible for the remaining mortgage debt. Additionally, Mr. Torres will pay Mrs. Torres $120,000 within 30 days as her portion of the remaining community assets. This takes into account both the hidden transfers and the depleted estate. Furthermore, Mr. Torres will pay Mrs. Torres's attorney fees in the amount of $40,000. I heard my mom gasp behind me. Rachel reached over and squeezed my hand. The residence will be transferred to Mrs. Torres alone within 60 days, the judge continued. Mr. Torres, you have 60 days to vacate. There will be no further contact regarding property division. If you have questions, you will direct them to your attorney. She banged her gavel. All rise. We stood as she left the bench, and I felt the room spin slightly. I'd won. Not just won, decisively won. The house was mine. The house that Michael had tried to take from me. The house that Karen had wanted for her son. The house that represented 6 years of my life. It was mine. Sherman was already ushering Michael out of the courtroom. Michael didn't look back at me. He looked like a man who'd finally understood that he'd lost. Rachel turned to me with a smile that was equal parts satisfaction and vindication. Congratulations, she said. You fought like hell, and you won. I looked at my mom, and she was crying. Happy tears, but tears. Let's go home, I said. 3 months later, I stood in my house, legally, entirely, undeniably my house, and I signed the final deed transfer. The mortgage was paid off using the $120,000 Michael had been ordered to pay me. The title was in my name alone. The house was mine, in a way that marriage had never made it ours. I'd kept my job at the HR company. I'd gone back after the first hearing, and I'd thrown myself into work. It was easier than sitting at home thinking about how I'd been betrayed. It was easier than wondering what I'd missed, what I'd ignored, what I could have done differently. But the truth was simpler than that. I hadn't done anything differently because there was nothing I could have done differently. Michael had made his choices. Karen had made hers. Jennifer had made hers. And I'd made mine, to fight, to document, to refuse the offer that would have erased me. On the day the deed transferred, I called Diane. I own my house, I told her, free and clear. I just signed the final papers. Ashley, that's amazing, she said. How do you feel? I thought about that. How did I feel? Relieved, yes. Vindicated, absolutely. But underneath that was something else. Something quieter. I felt like myself again. Not the version of myself that had stood on the highway in a sundress and flip-flops. Not the version that had been thrown away. The version that had fought back and won. I feel free, I said finally. And that was the truth. The money was good. The house was beautiful. The vindication was sweet, but the real victory was simpler than any of that. I'd looked my husband in the eye, and I'd refused to disappear. I'd looked at my mother-in-law's machinations, and I'd refused to crumble. I'd looked at every unfair offer, every threat, every attempt to erase me from my own life, and I'd said no, and I'd meant it. That's the thing nobody tells you about surviving betrayal. It's not about getting even. It's not about winning in court or taking the house or proving you were right. It's about the moment you realize that the person who tried to destroy you couldn't actually do it because you wouldn't let them. Michael moved to Denver 6 months later. Jennifer was with him, according to Facebook. Karen retired and sold her house. I never saw either of them again. And I lived in my house, with my dog, in the life I'd fought to keep, knowing that I'd earned every square foot of it, not through marriage, but through the courage it took to refuse to disappear.